I can see yield my power. My pillars! My hand does success. Rise to Caesar.
They were melting down a god. For 3 days, the bronze left Nicomedia in wagons, a statue 120 feet tall. The emperor cast as the sun itself, arm outstretched as if light obeyed his commands. Every citizen knew that face, and in 326 CE, Constantine ordered it destroyed, not because he rejected imperial divinity. He did it because he'd found something better. Within a year, he'd pour those same resources into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The old gods were dying, a new god was rising, and the emperor who understood this first would control the next 1,000 years. Here's what most people don't understand about power. An empire of 60 million people cannot be ruled by personality. It's ruled through systems, through administrators who never see the emperor, through soldiers who guard frontiers thousands of miles from Rome, through laws that function when the ruler is dead. Rome perfected that machinery. But here's the question. If an emperor can melt down a god made in his own image, what does he build in its place? Stay with me, because once you see how absolute power was actually constructed, you can't unsee it, and you'll start seeing it everywhere. Augustus, November 27th, 43 BCE. The prescription lists went up at dawn. Wooden boards mounted in the forum, 300 senators, 2,000 equestrians, every name a death sentence, every name a property confiscation. Imagine standing there, looking for your name, your father's name, your brother's. Some names made sense: political enemies, military rivals. Other names were shocking: men who'd done nothing wrong except possess wealth the new rulers needed. Cicero's name appeared on November 28th. He tried to flee. Soldiers caught him at his villa. They cut off his head and hands and displayed them in the forum where Cicero had given speeches for decades. Mark Antony's wife Fulvia reportedly pulled out Cicero's tongue and stabbed it repeatedly with her hairpin. This is how the Roman Empire began, not with careful statecraft, but with murder lists and severed heads in the forum. The architect, a 19-year-old named Octavian, later known as Augustus. 13 years of eliminating rivals. The Battle of Philippi destroyed the Republican armies. Actium in 31 BCE destroyed the last threat, Antony and Cleopatra. Octavian returned to Rome in 29 BCE as undisputed master. He was 33. He commanded 60 legions. Every rival was dead. He could do anything. What he did next was brilliant. January 27 BCE. Octavian appeared before the Senate and announced he was returning all his powers to the state. The civil wars were over. The Republic was restored. He would retire to private life. The Senate, carefully prepared through months of negotiation, refused. They begged him to remain. They granted him proconsular imperium. They gave him the title Augustus, sacred, revered. They made him first among equals. They granted him tribunician power. Augustus accepted, reluctantly, for the good of Rome. It was the greatest political performance in history, and everyone knew it was performance, but they participated anyway, because the alternative was more heads in the forum. Here's the genius. Augustus never called himself emperor. He accumulated republican offices, each one legal, each one precedented. The Senate still met, citizens still voted, consuls were still elected, but Augustus controlled every outcome. This is how you kill a republic, and make citizens thank you for it. The Praetorian Guard, 9 cohorts to enforce his will. The Fiscus, the emperor's personal treasury, that became wealthier than the state. The Cursus Publicum, the imperial post giving Augustus information faster than anyone else. Control of the grain supply, control of religion, control of the military, control of everything. And he ruled for 41 years, long enough that most Romans never remembered the Republic, long enough that his system became normal. According to Suetonius, Augustus's last words were asking whether he'd played his part in the comedy of life. Well, Then he requested applause, as at the end of a theatrical performance. He knew his reign was theatre, the restoration was fiction, the Senate's powers were props, the elections were scripted, but the performance worked. It gave Rome 41 years of peace, after a century of civil war. The cost: the Republic died. Speech became dangerous. Ovid learned this when Augustus exiled him in 8 CE for a poem and an error that were never specified. Even fame offered no protection. Augustus solved the fundamental problem of power: how to make autocracy acceptable to people who believe in freedom. The solution was illusion. Maintain the forms while changing the substance. Make transformation gradual, so each step seems natural. Die in bed after decades of rule, so your system becomes normal. Augustus created power through violence, and maintained it through systems that made future violence unnecessary. This is the foundation. But Augustus's system created a new problem. He proved one man could control everything. What happens when the bridge should have been impossible? Over 3,000 feet long, 20 stone pillars rising from the Danube, each 150 feet tall, strong enough for artillery. When completed in 105 CE, it was the longest bridge the ancient world had ever seen. Its purpose wasn't commerce, its purpose was conquest. And on the northern bank waited Dacia, ruled by King Decebalus, who had defeated Roman armies, extracted tribute from Rome, and survived. That survival was intolerable. The bridge was a declaration. Roman power could overcome any obstacle. Roman engineering could bridge any river. Roman legions could reach any enemy. This was characteristic of Trajan: direct, practical, absolute in execution. When he became emperor in 98 CE, he stayed on the frontier for 2 years before entering Rome. When he finally entered in 99 CE, he walked, no triumphal procession, no imperial regalia. The symbolism was perfect. This emperor earned power through competence, not inheritance. But the modesty was performance. The First Dacian War began in 101 CE. Decebalus submitted by 102 CE. The victory celebration in Rome lasted 123 days. 10,000 gladiators fought. 11,000 animals were killed. But Decebalus rebuilt his forces. By 105 CE, he was raiding again. The Second Dacian War was shorter and more brutal. Decebalus was hunted relentlessly. When cornered, he committed suicide. His head was brought to Trajan. The wealth extracted was extraordinary. 5 million pounds of gold, 10 million pounds of silver. Trajan used this wealth for construction throughout the empire. Trajan's Forum, the largest ever built. Trajan's Column, markets, aqueducts, roads, cities upgraded with Dacian gold. The Dacian conquest proved aggressive expansion could still be profitable. This lesson shaped Trajan's next campaign. In 113 CE, he invaded Parthia, Rome's only peer competitor. Previous attempts had failed catastrophically. Crassus defeated and killed. Mark Antony's invasion repelled. Trajan wanted total victory. Armenia annexed. Cities fell. Ctesiphon, the Parthian capital, captured. Trajan reached the Persian Gulf. The empire reached its maximum territorial extent. From Britain to the Persian Gulf, 5 million square kilometers, 65 million people. Trajan declared victory, but the empire was stretching beyond its capacity. Jewish communities throughout the eastern provinces revolted simultaneously. Hundreds of thousands died. The Parthians counterattacked. Territories Trajan had conquered rebelled. Roman garrisons were besieged. The new provinces became indefensible, and Trajan fell ill. Stroke symptoms, paralysis, speech difficulties. He attempted to return to Rome but only reached Cilicia. There he died on August 8, 117 CE. Hadrian became emperor and immediately abandoned the eastern conquests. Mesopotamia evacuated. Armenia reverted to client status. The greatest territorial extent of the empire lasted less than a year. Here's what this reveals. Trajan could conquer Parthia. His legions could take Ctesiphon, but he couldn't make the conquest permanent. This was the limit of sword power. Conquest requires maintenance. Territory requires administration. Victory requires permanence, or it becomes meaningless. The Senate deified him immediately. His reputation as the best emperor became canonical. Medieval writers compared all good rulers to Trajan. But Trajan had demonstrated empire has limits. The bridge across the Danube was dismantled on Hadrian's orders. The stone pillars remained for centuries. Eventually they collapsed. Nothing remains visible today, but the bridge existed. It demonstrated Roman engineering could accomplish the impossible, and it demonstrated the empire couldn't hold everything it could conquer. Hadrian understood this, and he made a different choice entirely. Hadrian, the emperor, was crying. Not in public, not in Rome, but in Egypt, on the banks of the Nile. In October of 130 CE, a young man's body had been pulled from the water. His name was Antinous. Hadrian's grief was immediate and absolute. He founded a city on the spot, Antinopolis. He declared Antinopolis a god. He commissioned hundreds of statues. He established temples, priesthoods, festivals. He made private loss into public religion. The Senate accepted this because they had no choice. When the emperor declared someone divine, that person was divine. This was power at its most personal. One man's loss reshaped religious life for millions, because that man was emperor, and his will was law. But this emotional outburst wasn't how Hadrian usually operated. 73 miles across northern Britain stood his primary expression of power: stone and turf, 15 feet high, 10 feet thick, 16,000 soldiers garrisoning it. Hadrian's wall served no obvious military purpose. The northern tribes weren't significant threats. The wall couldn't prevent determined crossing, so why build it? Because Hadrian wanted a boundary, a line, a permanent marker of where Rome ended and barbarism began, a visible statement that imperial will could reshape geography. Hadrian spent over half his 21-year reign traveling. He visited every province: Britain, Germania, Greece, Asia, Syria, Judea, Egypt, Africa, Spain. He was the first emperor to systematically tour the entire empire, and everywhere he went he built, or reformed, or reorganized, or improved. Wall in Britain, wall in Germania, cities refounded, aqueducts built, the Pantheon rebuilt with its impossible concrete dome. But his most dramatic intervention was destruction. In 130 CE, Hadrian visited Judea. He decided on a permanent solution: found a Roman colony on Jerusalem's ruins, build a temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount, rename the city Aelia Capitolina, ban circumcision. These policies were designed to eliminate Jewish identity through cultural replacement, make Judaism impossible to practice, and it would die. The Jews revolted. The Bar Kokhba revolt began in 132 CE. It lasted 3.5 years. The rebels initially succeeded, captured Jerusalem, established an independent state, minted coins declaring freedom. Hadrian's response was systematic annihilation. He brought 12 legions, nearly half the imperial army. No quick victory, total defeat. Towns besieged and starved. Rebel strongholds isolated. Methodical destruction of every resistance center. Diocletian claims 580,000 Jews killed, 50 fortified towns destroyed, 985 villages destroyed. Judea's population devastated. The province was renamed Syria Palestina, erasing the name Judea. The new name referenced Philistines, ancient Jewish enemies. Hadrian wanted to eliminate, not just the revolt, but the memory that Jews ever controlled this land. This is power beyond military victory. The power to rename, to erase, to fundamentally alter identity and memory. The cost to Rome was severe. Entire legions were destroyed. Hadrian's victory, dispatched to the Senate, omitted the traditional opening, claiming he and the legions were well. They were not, but he achieved his objective. Jerusalem was Roman. The province was pacified. This pattern repeated throughout Hadrian's reign. Identify problems and solve them permanently. He created circuit judges for Italy, centralizing legal authority. He codified Roman law through the Perpetual Edict. He reformed civil service, creating hierarchies of administrators. Hadrian rationalized autocracy, made it systematic, made it bureaucratic, made it effective. When Antinous drowned, Hadrian deified him. Antinous was neither emperor nor family. He was a provincial youth with no position. Hadrian deified him anyway. This demonstrated something fundamental. The emperor could make anything happen. The Senate couldn't refuse. This became clear early in his reign. In 118 CE, 4 senior ex-consuls were executed for alleged conspiracy. What's certain is Hadrian wanted them dead, and they died. When Hadrian died in 138 CE at age 62, the Senate initially refused deification. They hated him, but Antoninus Pius, Hadrian's successor, threatened to refuse the throne unless they complied. The Senate yielded. His last poem survives. Little soul wandering, gentle guest and companion of the body, where will you go now, pale, stiff, bare, no longer joking as you used to? The poem reveals awareness of mortality, understanding that power ends at death, but his works outlasted him. The Pantheon stands today, its dome still the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built. Hadrian's wall survives across northern Britain. His legal reforms shaped Roman law for centuries. Augustus created the system, Trajan expanded it through conquest, Hadrian perfected it through rationalization. The wall in Britain wasn't militarily necessary, but it was psychologically powerful. It stated that the emperor had decided where Britain ended. That decision became permanent geography. Soldiers walked it for 3 centuries. Because the emperor commanded, and the command was executed, and the execution was permanent. Hadrian understood that empire is infrastructure. Physical infrastructure, walls, roads, aqueducts. Legal infrastructure, codes, courts, procedures. Administrative infrastructure, bureaucrats, hierarchies, reporting systems. All designed to function automatically. He built that infrastructure systematically. And it worked, but even perfect infrastructure can't save a collapsing system. Diocletian. In 284 CE, the empire was dying. For 50 years, over 50 men had claimed to be emperor. Most ruled for months before violent death. Provinces seceded. The Gallic Empire controlled Gaul, Britain, and Spain. The Palmyrene Empire controlled Syria, Egypt, and Asia Minor. The frontiers were collapsing. Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine and Danube repeatedly. The Sassanid Persians captured Emperor Valerian. He died in captivity. The economy was devastated, currency debased to near worthlessness. The silver content of the denarius fell from over 90% under Augustus to less than 5%. Cities shrank behind walls. Rural areas were abandoned. Trade declined. Civil war had become normal. This was the situation when Diocletian became emperor in November 284 CE. He was 40, a military commander from Dalmatia. Not aristocratic, not educated in the traditional sense, but he understood organization, and he reorganized everything. First, succession. The problem was that each emperor's death triggered civil war. Diocletian's solution was eliminating personal succession entirely. He created the Tetrarchy, 2 senior emperors called Augusti, and 2 junior emperors called Caesars. Each Augustus ruled for 20 years maximum, then retired voluntarily. The Caesars became Augusti. New Caesars were appointed. This was revolutionary. For 3 centuries, emperors ruled until death. Civil war was common. Diocletian made succession mechanical. In 286 CE, he appointed Maximian as co-Augustus. In 293 CE, Galerius and Constantius became Caesars. Each tetrarch governed a quarter of the empire. Rome was not a tetrarchic capital. The symbolic center of empire was abandoned for military and administrative convenience. Second, administration. Diocletian divided the empire into 4 prefectures, 12 dioceses, and over 100 provinces. This created massive bureaucracy, but also control. No single governor commanded enough troops to rebel. No single region could secede. He separated civil and military authority completely. Governors couldn't command legions. Military commanders couldn't collect taxes. Third, the military. Diocletian expanded the army dramatically, from approximately 300,000 to possibly 500,000 or more. Fourth, taxation. The old system based on cash payment had collapsed. Diocletian replaced it with taxation in kind. Provinces paid grain, livestock, manufactured goods directly. He conducted empire-wide census. The census measured land area, land quality, population, livestock, everything taxable. Fifth, imperial presentation. Diocletian abandoned Augustan fiction completely. He was not princeps, first citizen, he was dominus, lord. Purple robes embroidered with gold, subjects prostrated before him, claimed descent from Jupiter. The emperor was divine on earth. This was the dominate. No more pretense. All these reforms required enforcement. Diocletian was ruthless. When mint workers in Alexandria protested, thousands were executed. When Egypt revolted, the siege was followed by mass executions. But his most systematic violence targeted Christians. In 303 CE, the Great Persecution began. Christian scriptures burned, churches destroyed, Christians ordered to sacrifice or die. In the East, enforcement was severe. Thousands died. In the West, under Constantius, enforcement was minimal. This variation would have consequences. The persecution lasted 8 years. It failed completely. Christians practiced secretly. Martyrdom strengthened community identity. By 311 CE, Galerius issued an edict of toleration, admitting defeat. But in 305 CE, Diocletian did something unprecedented. He retired. May 1st, 305 CE, simultaneous ceremonies in Nicomedia and Milan. Diocletian and Maximian abdicated. The succession happened exactly as planned, for about 1 year. Then Constantius died. His son Constantine was acclaimed emperor by his troops in Britain, violating tetrarchic succession. The empire fractured. Civil war consumed the tetrarchy. Constantine defeated Maxentius at Milvian Bridge in 312 CE. By 324 CE, Constantine ruled alone. The tetrarchy was dead. Diocletian died watching civil war destroy what he had built. Some say suicide, others illness. Some claim he starved himself. But his reforms survived. The expanded bureaucracy continued. The separation of civil and military authority became standard. The tax system in kind lasted for centuries. Constantine completed Diocletian's transformation, moved the capital to Constantinople, converted to Christianity, making the religion Diocletian had persecuted into the state religion. Diocletian built a palace for retirement in Split, 9 acres, stone walls 40 feet high. He spent his final years growing vegetables. When former colleagues begged him to return and resolve the civil wars, he reportedly replied, "If you could see the cabbages I have planted, you would understand why I refuse." The palace survives. People live within the palace walls. Shops operate in ancient corridors. The palace became a city because it was built to last. Diocletian attempted something no predecessor had tried, making the imperial system independent of the emperor's person, creating structures that would function automatically. He failed in his ultimate goal. The tetrarchy collapsed, but his administrative reforms created the late Roman Empire, a state that survived in the East for another 1,000 years. The cabbages grew, the civil wars raged, the system survived in modified form, and the man who would complete the transformation was already marching toward Rome, under a new symbol, Constantine, October 27, 312 CE. The day before Constantine would fight Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge. Constantine's army was outnumbered. Maxentius controlled Rome, Italy, and Africa. Constantine controlled Gaul and Britain. This battle would determine the Western Empire's future. According to Eusebius, Constantine saw a cross of light in the sky above the sun. Words appeared, "In this sign conquer." That night Christ appeared in a dream and commanded Constantine to use the sign as protection in battle. Constantine ordered his soldiers to mark their shields with the Chi-Rho symbol, the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek. The next day, his army defeated Maxentius. Maxentius drowned fleeing across a pontoon bridge. Whether this vision actually occurred is unknowable. What matters is what Constantine did afterward. He attributed victory to the Christian God. He began favoring Christianity openly, and within 13 years, He had transformed Christianity from persecuted sect into imperially favored religion. This transformation changed not just Rome, but Western civilization. It made Christianity possible as a world religion. It shaped European history for 2 millennia. But we must understand what Constantine actually was. Not a saint, not a theologian, but a ruthless, capable politician who recognized an opportunity and seized it with absolute commitment. When Constantine's father Constantius died in 306 CE at York, his troops proclaimed Constantine Augustus. This violated tetrarchic succession. The tetrarchy collapsed into civil war. 6 men claimed imperial authority. Between 306 and 324 CE, Constantine eliminated rivals systematically. By September 324 CE, he ruled alone. This 18-year struggle shaped Constantine's religious policy. He needed military support. He needed legitimacy. He needed something to distinguish himself from rivals. Christianity provided all three. Here's what most people miss. The Christian population was significant in key regions: Egypt, Syria, Asia Minor, North Africa. These areas had resisted persecution. Supporting Christianity gained Constantine's support. But more importantly, Christianity provided ideological justification for sole rule. The pagan gods were local. Jupiter protected Rome, Mars favored soldiers, Neptune ruled seas. But the Christian God was universal. One God, one empire, one emperor. The theology aligned perfectly with Constantine's political objective. He began cautiously. The Edict of Milan, in 313 CE, established religious toleration. Christians could practice freely. But this didn't make Christianity the state religion. It simply ended persecution. Constantine's support became more explicit over time. Funded church construction, granted bishops judicial authority, exempted clergy from taxes, involved himself in doctrinal disputes, convening the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. But he also maintained pagan practices. He held the title Pontifex Maximus. He minted coins with solar imagery. This ambiguity was strategic. The empire remained majority pagan. The army was largely pagan. The aristocracy was pagan. Constantine couldn't afford to alienate these groups, so he favored Christianity while tolerating paganism. The real transformation came in his administrative and military reforms. Constantine completed the separation of civil and military authority. He created new mobile field armies. He reformed the Praetorian Guard out of existence. Most dramatically, he founded a new capital, Constantinople, built on Byzantium, strategically located on the Bosphorus. Construction began in 324 CE. The city was inaugurated in 330 CE. The new capital was Christian from inception. Churches built prominently, pagan temples excluded, the city's foundation blessed by Christian clergy. Constantine signaled that the empire's future was Christian. But Constantine also demonstrated ruthless cruelty. In 326 CE, he ordered the execution of his eldest son Crispus. The reasons remain disputed. Shortly after, his wife Fausta died in suspicious circumstances. The official story was accidental death in an overheated bath. Within months, Constantine's wife and eldest son were both dead. These killings reveal Constantine's character. He was not gentle, not forgiving, not restrained by family bonds. He was absolutely focused on power and eliminated anyone he perceived as a threat, including family. His religious convictions did not prevent political murder. He delayed baptism until his deathbed, a common practice allowing one to die cleansed of sin regardless of prior actions. This suggests he understood Christianity as a path to salvation, but didn't let it constrain political behavior. He continued campaigning into old age, planning a campaign against Persia when he fell ill in 337 CE. He died near Nicomedia on May 22, 65 years old, having ruled 31 years. His sons divided the empire. Within 3 years they were fighting. Civil war resumed. The succession mechanism Constantine had established failed immediately, like Diocletian's tetrarchy. But Constantine's religious transformation proved permanent. His sons were Christian. The emperors who followed were Christian, except for Julian's brief pagan restoration. By the end of the 4th century, Christianity was not just favored but mandatory. Theodosius I made it the official state religion and outlawed pagan worship. Constantine made Christianity possible as a world religion. Without imperial support, Christianity might have remained a minority sect. With it, Christianity became dominant. The consequences were world historical. Medieval Europe was Christian. The Byzantine Empire was Christian for another 1,000 years. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the Reformation, European colonialism spreading Christianity globally. All of this traces back to Constantine's recognition that Christianity served imperial purposes. Whether Constantine genuinely converted is unknowable. What we can document is that he recognized Christianity's political utility and exploited it brilliantly. He changed the empire's fundamental identity. Augustus created the imperial system. Trajan expanded it militarily. Hadrian rationalized it administratively. Diocletian saved it from collapse. Constantine transformed it religiously and culturally. The empire before Constantine was pagan. The empire after Constantine was Christian. This transformation affected everything. Law incorporated Christian principles. Culture reflected Christian values. Art depicted Christian themes. Society organized around Christian institutions. And all of this happened because one man decided that the Christian God was useful for maintaining power, not because divine revelation compelled him, but because he understood that religious authority could reinforce political authority. That universal God justified universal emperor. He was right. Christianity proved extraordinarily useful for imperial power. The church provided legitimacy. Bishops supported emperors. Doctrine emphasized obedience to authority. The religion of a crucified Jewish carpenter became the religion of emperors and armies and conquest. Constantine saw a symbol and claimed it gave him victory. He promoted the religion associated with that symbol. He funded its institutions. He made it central to imperial identity. And the religion that had been persecuted by Diocletian became the religion that defined Europe. The church that had met in secret became the institution that crowned emperors. The faith that had produced martyrs produced bishops and popes and ultimately political power, rivaling emperors themselves. This was Constantine's achievement. Not theological, not spiritual, but political. The Christian God became useful for Constantine's purposes, and Constantine became useful for Christianity's expansion. 2,000 years later, Christianity remains a world religion. Constantine's city, renamed Istanbul, remains a major metropolis. This is power that transcends death, power that shapes civilizations. Augustus created the imperial system. Constantine determined what that system would worship. Both transformations proved permanent. We started with a statue being melted down. Now you understand what it meant. Constantine didn't just destroy a symbol. He demonstrated that power itself is transferable, that it doesn't live in bronze or gold or temples. It lives in systems, in structures, in the machinery that converts one person's will into millions of people's reality. Augustus showed how to build that machinery. Trajan showed its reach. Hadrian showed its efficiency. Diocletian showed it could survive crisis. Constantine showed it could change what people worship. 5 men across 5 centuries, each one demonstrating what absolute power enables. The power to create political systems that survive millennia. The power to reshape geography. The power to impose order. The power to save collapsing civilizations. The power to determine what billions of people believe. But also the cost. Augustus began with prescription lists. Heads in the forum. Trajan's conquests killed hundreds of thousands. Hadrian attempted cultural erasure. Diocletian's reforms required mass executions. Constantine murdered his own family. This is the reality of absolute power. It enables extraordinary achievement and produces extraordinary suffering. The same systems that maintain order also enforce subjugation. The same institutions that provide justice also enable oppression. These 5 emperors were not uniquely evil. They were uniquely capable. They understood power, how to acquire it, how to maintain it, how to project it, how to make it permanent. We inherit what they built. Our legal systems derive from Roman law. Our cities echo Roman planning. Our political vocabulary is Roman. Our understanding of empire is Roman. The pantheon remains. The walls remain. The laws remain. The church remains. The understanding remains that absolute power is possible. But also, the prescription lists remain in memory. The conquered peoples remain in history. The murdered families remain as warnings. These 5 men ruled an empire of 60 million people across 3 continents. They made decisions determining whether civilizations survived. They built systems functioning automatically. They created institutions lasting centuries. They shaped our world. This is not admiration. This is not condemnation. This is understanding. Power at this scale is neither good nor evil, but simply power, a tool that can build or destroy. What matters is not the power itself, but what those who wield it choose to do. Augustus chose order over freedom. Trajan chose glory over sustainability. Hadrian chose efficiency over autonomy. Diocletian chose survival over mercy. Constantine chose Christianity over paganism. Each choice shaped centuries. Each decision determined the futures of millions. The statue Constantine melted became churches. Power transformed from pagan emperor worship to Christian institutional authority. But it remained power, absolute, unrestrained, capable of anything. The architecture of power remains. The ruins stand. The walls endure. The law persists. The church survives. We live in the world these 5 emperors built. And once you see how absolute power was constructed, you cannot unsee it. Look around, you'll start seeing it everywhere.